You know, some speeches are just words that fill the air, but then there are others that become weapons and shields and symbols for an entire nation. Today, we're going to take a look at one of the most powerful speeches ever given, Winston Churchill's "We Shall Fight on the Beaches." We're going to dive in and uncover not just what he said, but why it landed with such incredible force.
Right there. Those are the words everyone remembers. They're raw, they're powerful, and they're just absolute. They've been quoted in movies, echoed by leaders. They've really come to define the whole spirit of British resolve. But to really, truly get them, we have to look at the moment they were born.
And that's the central puzzle here, isn't it? This legendary speech, it wasn't given after some huge victory. Nope. It came right after a miraculous escape from what should have been an utter catastrophe. So why? Why did Churchill choose this moment of relief, not for celebration, but for a grim promise of a whole lot more fighting to come?
To answer that, we have to go back and understand just how close Britain was to the absolute edge. The situation over in France in May of 1940, well, it wasn't just bad. It was, as Churchill himself called it, a colossal military disaster.
Now, what's really fascinating about this quote is the timing. Churchill said this just 1 week before he gave that famous speech. Think about that. He was actively preparing the British people for the worst news imaginable, the complete and total loss of its professional army.
So, just try to imagine the scene. The German army's armored divisions, the Panzers, had just swept through France like a scythe. They completely cut off the British Expeditionary Force, the BEF, which was the main professional British army, from their supplies, from their allies, from any real hope of escape. They were pinned against the coast, literally facing annihilation.
And the human cost was just staggering. More than 30,000 British soldiers, part of that root and core of the army, were killed, wounded, or went missing in that ferocious fighting. An entire generation of Britain's best soldiers was on the verge of being completely wiped out. The material losses, just as devastating. Almost 1,000 artillery pieces, the heavy firepower of the entire army, had to be abandoned right there on the fields of France. They were just left behind for the enemy to scoop up. And this really captures the sheer scale of the loss. Every single tank, every truck, all the mobile equipment that represented the first fruits of Britain's entire war industry, it was all gone. The army had its men back, sure, but it had lost all of its teeth.
But then, something completely unexpected happened. Out of the jaws of this absolute disaster came what would forever be known as the miracle of deliverance, the evacuation from Dunkirk.
The contrast here is just mind-blowing. The absolute best-case scenario the planners were hoping for was to maybe save 30,000 men. Instead, in this heroic 9-day effort, over 10 times that number were rescued from the beaches. It was an outcome that literally nobody had dared to even dream of.
So how on earth did they do it? With this incredible, completely improvised flotilla. And it wasn't just the Royal Navy. No, it was a fleet of fishing boats and yachts and little merchant ships, crewed by ordinary civilian volunteers, sailing straight into a war zone under constant bombing and artillery fire, all to bring their army home.
Back in Britain, as you can imagine, there was this massive wave of national euphoria. The army was saved. But this is where Churchill faced his next huge challenge. He had to frame this deliverance correctly. He knew that all that relief could very quickly turn into dangerous complacency.
And this is where Churchill, the leader, immediately steps in to manage expectations. He addresses the nation and essentially says, look, be thankful, but do not for 1 second think that we have won. It was just a masterclass in realistic leadership. And then he does something absolutely brilliant. He pivots. He acknowledges the disaster of the evacuation, but he points to a hidden victory, one that was absolutely crucial for morale. He tells the nation to look to the skies.
Because while the army was being rescued down on the beaches, the Royal Air Force was up above fighting this desperate, brutal battle. A lot of the soldiers on the ground didn't even see them. They only saw the German bombers that got through. But the RAF inflicted devastating losses on the much larger German Air Force. We're talking a ratio of at least 4 to 1. This was the proof. This was the sign that Britain could fight back and win.
So now Churchill has set the stage perfectly. He's acknowledged the disaster, he's tempered the euphoria, and he's highlighted a key victory. He's now ready to use his speech not just to report on the past, but to arm the entire nation for the future. And this was the new, terrifying reality.
With the fall of France, the enemy wasn't across a continent anymore, they were just across the English Channel. For the first time in centuries, a full-scale invasion of Britain wasn't just possible, it was expected at any moment. And this is the real genius of Churchill's strategy. You see, his speech was a perfect piece of crisis communication. He masterfully balanced these four key elements: being honest about the defeat, showing gratitude for the escape, giving a stark warning of the danger ahead, and finally, a call to unbreakable unity and resolve.
And all of this, every single piece, builds to that final, legendary crescendo. This is the part of the speech that transforms it from a simple report to Parliament into a defiant roar that was heard all around the world. Just listen to the rhythm of it, the repetition. He starts with the battles that were just lost in France. Then he brings the fight closer and closer to home. First the seas, then the beaches, then the landing grounds, the fields, the streets. It's this escalating promise that resistance will be absolute and total. It leaves absolutely no room for doubt.
But that final part, it wasn't just for a British audience. Oh no, it was a direct signal to the United States. At a time when America was still officially neutral, and many in Washington thought Britain was basically a lost cause, Churchill was broadcasting a message of pure defiance. He was saying, "We will not fall. We will fight on, alone if we have to, until you, the new world, with all your power and might, are ready to join this struggle."
So we end with this question. Churchill's speech is this timeless lesson in leadership, and it shows us that sometimes the greatest strength isn't found in celebrating a narrow escape, but in looking clear-eyed at the immense struggle that's still to come, and choosing to fight on, no matter what the cost.